the natural sciences and engineering. And she has been fundamental so instrumental in the university's effort for providing support for writing, raising the quality of university student faculty's writing. And so recently she has given a number of lectures and guest lectures in the classrooms about how to incorporate AI into the writing practice. So today we will hear about her experience and probably a best practice in using AI for education. And without further ado, I would like to pass the microphone to Professor Mann.
Thank you, Mitsu. I'm going to share my screen, my slides with everybody, if that's okay. And I'll make it slideshow. Can somebody let me know if they're seeing this correctly?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you for that introduction, Mitsu. Thank you to everybody who's here today. I wanted to make a few sort of alterations to the introduction. I don't feel like I'm carrying a flag. I'm trying to work with AI and academic writing, and we're in a position where we're all kind of trying to figure it out at the same time. So if you're interested in figuring it out with me, we're going to talk about that during this session. So I'm April. I'm the Writing Center Director, and I also teach in the Department of Writing Studies. And I also work with faculty on their grants and articles at the Miller School of Medicine, at Rosenstiel, and here at Coral Gables campus. So in all three of these capacities, AI became on my radar pretty early. AI writing became on my radar pretty early. And so I've had to think about it since ChatGPT was released in fall 2022. And lately I've been talking around campus a lot about AI and writing with students, with graduate students, with faculty, with staff. And each time I talk about AI, in the audience, there are usually people who are way ahead of me in terms of AI. And there are people who are haven't yet really jumped into AI. They're using the Google search that is now AI, but they're not usually using it in their teaching or writing. I'm not going to really talk about teaching that much today. I'm going to talk about it a little bit at the end. Mostly, I'm going to talk about academic writing, using AI in your own academic writing. And then I'm going to ask people at the end of the webinar, I'm going to ask you to share creative and innovative ways that you're using AI in your writing, because I've been learning a lot from talking to people about how they're using AI, and people are doing so many interesting things. So if you have something that you do that you think other people would be interested in, please plan on submitting that as a question or as a comment at the end. I'm going to try and curate a little library of useful tools and prompts for academic writing and put it on the Writing Center's website as a takeaway from today's talk. So this is going to be a using AI talk, but I do want to acknowledge some legitimate concerns about AI, and I don't want to just gloss over them as if they're not real things. And I know that everybody who uses AI is concerned about hallucinations. Excuse me. Hallucinations, of course, are just a fancy word for AI getting things wrong. I don't know if you remember, there was a very brief time when Gemini, Google's AI, was telling people that a good way to get your pizza toppings to stay on was to put glue on them. There's a very short time when AI was giving us that piece of advice. And if you've used AI at all, you know that it still gets things wrong. It gets things wrong today. And so when you're using AI in your academic work, you have to be very careful about any information it gives you. We also know that everything is starting to sound like AI writing. I'm particularly obsessed by AI writing, and how it's making AI, it's making all the things we come across on the internet sound kind of the same. There's an interesting article in the New York Times called "Why Does AI Sound Like That? Why does AI write like that?" If you're interested in that, I would suggest you take a look at that article. Another concern is confidentiality risks. If you are a reviewer for a journal or a grant, you know that you are not supposed to be putting people's articles and grant proposals in AI, because when you put things in AI, you are giving it to OpenAI or Google or Anthropic. And if you're reviewing someone else's work, you have not been authorized to do that. So we have to be careful with that. We also, and on the University of Miami's AI policy page, it says that we're not allowed to put student or data or patient data into AI. I think now that we have Copilot behind the firewall, we're allowed to put FERPA data, student data, into AI, but I don't know what the patient data situation is. I know that the doctors have special tools for clinical practice, but if you're writing about it, I'm not sure what the Copilot rule is. So be very careful with your own data about what you want to give to OpenAI or Anthropic. And we know that AI is very confidently wrong all of the time. When it hallucinates, it does not give you any indication that it thinks it might be making something up. One of my colleagues who may be on this call explained to the rest of us that when she tells her AI that she cares about things being accurate, she gets a much better response. It doesn't assume that accuracy is important to you. And ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, their primary objective is to please you more than it is to get things right. So you might want to make sure it knows that getting things right is important to you. And then there are environmental and ethical concerns that I put together in this box. And obviously, it's beyond the scope of this talk, and it's not something we can do about during this talk, but we know that there are bias concerns, there are copyright concerns, there are environmental concerns with all the data centers going up all over the world and our plan to be in space, if they can figure out how to do that. It's using a lot of power, it's using a lot of water. And these are really legitimate concerns that we can't dismiss just because it's a very useful tool. The one we can really talk about today is cognitive offloading. When you give AI a role as a thinking partner, which we're going to do today, I'm going to suggest that you do today, you want to be careful you're not outsourcing all of your thoughts and ideas to the machine, because what is the point of writing if it's not your thoughts and ideas? If you're a student, that's one thing, but if you're a faculty member, if you're a researcher, you have to add value to what the AI can produce. Many of my talks have been with students, and when I talk to students about writing, I usually use a visual, something along the lines of this, which was created by Napkin AI, which is a very fun tool that makes visuals out of your concepts. It's not perfect, and this visual is not perfect, but it's really a fun tool, and students like it a lot. When we ask students to write, we're not just interested in them writing papers because we need more papers about the French Revolution. We want them to write because we want there to be cognitive development. We want them to engage intellectually. We want them to be creative and analytical. That's the product is not the point, the process is the point. In workplace writing, broadly speaking, the product is the point. The emails are the point. The expense report is the point. And getting to that point efficiently and productively is key. If you have to write 150 emails today, you can't spend an hour on each one. So it's a different process. And completing your tasks is a primary objective of workplace writing. But academic writing, which is the subject of today's talk, if I haven't made that clear, is a weaving together of these two things. We want to be efficient and productive in our journal articles and our grant proposals and our books, but we also want deep intellectual engagement. We want creativity and analytical thought. So we have to weave these two together. I asked Claude to weave those two together, and it made me this little graphic. where you have your intellectual writing on the purple version, and the green is your workplace writing. And we're weaving them together into little pot holder kind of thing that we used to make in summer camp when I was a kid. And so weaving these two together is a nice way to think about what you want to do when you're using academic writing. When I talk to students, I also talk to them about red flags. The students are very interested in the red flags for academic writing. And everybody now talks about M dashes. As somebody who's been teaching writing here for a long time, thank you, Mitsu, for pointing that out. M dashes are something I've been teaching for many years. And now I have to tell people to be careful using M dashes because AI loves M dashes. And you'll notice that there's two in this slide. And I've started writing in emails. If I have a dash in the email, I write in the parentheses, I put that dash there myself. It's not AI because I'm not willing to give up the M dashes, but I know that it's a red flag for AI use. Maybe you've noticed the not just X but Y. If you have your students, if you have AI writing for you, or if you're reading student papers, there's a lot of not X but Y. And there's a lot of intricate tapestries. Everything is a journey or a deep dive or a delve. If you're writing a longer document and a scientific document and you do it in pieces and you use AI for it, it will redefine the acronyms every time you ask it to generate a new bit of text. It used to be that we defined acronyms once and then we used them as an acronym. That was the point of the acronym. So you didn't have to write it out each time. But AI doesn't necessarily put it all together in that way. And so it redefines them throughout. But I wanted to talk about the idea of red flags. Students are concerned about red flags because they feel like they're either doing something wrong by using AI or they're going to be accused of doing something wrong. And so they don't want it to sound like it's AI generated. And I think we all kind of feel like that. We don't want to flatten into just sounding like everybody else. And we also don't want it to seem like we're using AI, even though we're moving into a world where everybody's using AI all the time. When I give talks, I usually I'm in person or in a Zoom where I can see everybody, and I'm usually asking people how often they use AI, how many people use AI daily. I asked this in a grant writing class at the medical school last fall, and I would say 80% of the people there raised their hand that they used AI daily. And the rest of the people there who didn't use AI were looking around and having that feeling that they're getting left behind. So I've been asking that a lot to try to figure out where we are, to gauge how much usage is happening. When I ask students about it, in a class where their teacher is, they usually will not say that they use AI. But if I give them an anonymous survey at the beginning of the talk, then they're all using AI 100%. So they're using it, but they're afraid about it. And we're using it and we're not sure what's allowable because we're in this sort of time period where it's not exactly clear. We're trying to figure out what's okay. This is an article from Nature. They did a survey, they did a poll of 5,000 scientists to see if it's okay for AI to write science. There was not a consensus about this. We haven't figured this out. Many people thought certain tasks were okay. Writing an abstract of a paper you wrote yourself. If you asked AI to write the abstract, that was okay. If you wrote it and you wanted it to edit and fix the English, the grammar, most people thought that was okay. Is it okay for you to put your data in and have AI write up your results and your discussion about what those results mean? That was considered much less acceptable by the researchers. So we're still figuring that out, and it's a moving target. I'm going to show you some of the guidelines we have at this moment, but I would have to say that any guidelines I'm mentioning here are the guidelines as of April 10th, 2026, and don't hold me to that, what they might be Monday. So if you're writing a grant, here's the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. Here is their official policy about using AI in writing. Maybe you followed this saga, but up until last summer, the NIH had told proposal writers that it was okay for them to use AI. They had been very clear that reviewers were not allowed to use AI, but proposal writers could use them. And then last year, one researcher submitted 40 R01 grants in the same submission cycle. And so that was a big wake-up call for the NIH, and they backtracked a lot on their policy. They've reduced the amount of proposals an individual can submit, and they said you should write it yourself. So they won't consider it to be original ideas if it's substantially developed by AI or contains sections that are substantially developed by AI. What exactly that means, I don't know. And I don't know if anybody knows. But they're saying editing is okay, but they do warn about the risks. All of the journal publishers, they have their own disclosure policies. If you're writing for a journal, I suggest you check on the policy as you're going along, because what policy they had last month might be different now. When AI first came out, there was when ChatGPT first came out in fall of 2022, there was a very brief period where ChatGPT was listed as an author on specific articles. And I think everybody pulled back from that pretty quickly. We all have agreed, I think, that authorship implies responsibility, and the robot is not responsible. We, the authors, are 100% responsible. If we use a tool, that's one thing, but we cannot give the responsibility of the authorship to the tool. The rules for images in most journals are very strict, and I think you can imagine why. I think you can do like that little balance beam that I did earlier. I think that something like that would be okay. But if you're saying that this is an image that you saw in a microscope, this is a cell or a chart or something, like, your images should not be AI generated in those cases. In general, the humanities journals are assuming that you're writing yourself and not using AI generated text, and they want you more to cite specific AI generated sections. Whereas in the sciences, they might be assuming your whole paragraphs are generated by AI, but you are in charge of them. So if you're going to disclose that you're using AI, how do you do that? This is a template for writing an AI disclosure statement that I adapted from an article called "When and How to Disclose AI Use in Academic Publishing." The citation's at the bottom from Medical Teacher. And it's a very useful statement. You name the tool with the developer. If you have a version, you add that. You say what you did with it. Did you draft an outline? Did you improve sentence clarity? And then you confirm that you read it and you verified it, and you claim responsibility for that. The authors assume full responsibility. I would add to this that you should also, if you're writing something in a group, as most of us are, I would talk to your other authors, make sure everybody's on board with how to and how not to use AI in this work. Last summer, I was part of a team that was writing an AI and Writing Center statement for our international agency. And the four of us were writing a report together. And one person suggested we have an AI disclosure statement. And then the other two were horrified by the fact that two of the other authors were horrified by the fact that he had used AI, and they withdrew from the project completely. We had spent months working on it, and they did not want their names on it if any AI was used at all. So I suggested at the beginning of, and probably throughout a process of working together, you be very clear about your AI allowable uses. So because with this disclosure statement, I went ahead and drafted one for this presentation. So in preparing this webinar, I used Claude for slide creation and editing. I also used it for brainstorming and organization. I used Napkin to generate a graphic representation of concept. I reviewed and verified every AI-assisted suggestion as needed. I assume full responsibility for the accuracy, originality, and integrity of this work. I left in the Napkin because even though it was a little bit redundant, because I wanted you to see, it wasn't inaccurate, but it was not great. But I wanted you to see the sort of pros and cons of using something like that. I have to say that in writing this disclosure statement and sharing it with you, I've been really torn about it. I feel very vulnerable that I know that there might be some people thinking, well, she used AI and she didn't, like, this isn't even her work. It was just AI. I think the people who use AI regularly would not think that, but I can see it was an enactment of the discomfort our students feel when they have to disclose to us that they use AI, or that we feel when we have to put it on a journal article. So I think it's a good thing to do, but I can understand why it's a little bit touchy. It doesn't always feel great. So now that we've talked about the rules, I thought we would go over some of the tools that are available to you within the University of Miami AI infrastructure. So all three of the main writing tools, chatbots, are available to us at UM through the behind the UM firewall. ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. I would say that all of them are good, and all of them still make mistakes. So there's not one that you can use that won't make mistakes. Claude and ChatGPT are within the Microsoft Copilot ecosystem. So if you're using Microsoft and you want to use a chatbot, you can choose between the once you go into Copilot, you can choose one of these two options. You can use Gemini, that's also an alternative for you. And if all of your stuff is on Google Docs and you use Gmail, that might be the best thing to use. The good thing about using Copilot is that it has all of your Microsoft, it can access all of your other Microsoft stuff. So I'll give you an example of that in just a second. Within Copilot is also agents. I'm going to be really careful in this talk not to get too technical. I am not a computer scientist or a data scientist. I'm a writing center director. So I'm not going to start talking about APIs and RAG, and I'm not going to get all computer sciencey. But you should know about some of the agents that are available to us in Copilot. These are pre-made agents. You can make your own agents, but if you know how to do that, you probably don't need this talk that much. But here are 4 agents that might be useful for you in your academic writing. There's an idea coach, an analyst, a researcher, and a writing coach. I would like to point out that the subtitle of the writing coach, Take Your Writing to the Next Level, is the subtitle for all of our Writing Center material that we've been using for many years. So I feel personally a little bit attacked by that one. But these are 4 very useful agents. The idea coach will brainstorm with you. It will make you outlines. It'll make you mind maps. It'll point directions of places you can take your idea that you might not have thought about. For the analyst, you can put in your data. What do you think it means? And ask the analyst if it agrees with your interpretation of what your data means or not. With the researcher, you can put in a paragraph of your own work and ask it to consider where you need to cite, what you want to cite. The writing coach works with you like a coach. I tried it out this weekend. I downloaded some data that I've used with students, some survey data that was de-identified. And what I thought, I typed into the writing coach what I thought it meant and what data I had, and asked it to help me get started writing a paper about this, writing an article. And so it immediately accessed other things I had written that were similar that it had on OneDrive. And it accessed the research I had on OneDrive, the PDFs I had uploaded to OneDrive. It accessed previous emails I'd written about this topic, and it started generating a plan for me. And it suggested other things for me to look at and ways I might want to organize it. It suggested what kind of journals I might want to put this into, what it would be a good fit for. And I did walk away with a lot more. It took me, I spent a lot of time on it this weekend, but I walked away with the beginnings of an article much faster than I would have previously. There are a lot of research tools. These are not within the ecosystem. Some of the most famous are Perplexity, Elicit, and Research Rabbit, and they're great. I'm not the person to have speak about these, and if you are working with them and you want some help, I would recommend reaching out to Erica Newcomb, STEM librarian. This is her email here, exn297@miami.edu. She's great, and she'll be happy to talk to you about any of these AI research tools. I would like to spend a moment on the tools section talking about Notebook LM. Those of you who are way ahead of me probably are very familiar with Notebook. I feel like many people are sleeping on this tool and that it's pretty amazing. And so I would like to just spend a minute on it. I'm going to describe it, what it can do. You can upload documents, you can ask questions of those documents. It's kind of promoted as a second brain, like it's like an external hard drive for your brain. Like we're not good at holding 15, 20 articles in our heads at the same time and cross-referencing them against each other, but computers are good at that. And so it can do that, and you can upload all your research and then ask it questions. But I feel like that description doesn't really get at what Notebook can do. So I would like to show you briefly. Notebook is behind the firewall, so we are able to log into it. It's free anyway, but we do have it authorized usage of it. So this is Notebook, and let me just show you how I used it with my students last semester. So I was teaching first semester freshmen in a STEM writing class, and they were reading. We picked together. We read a scientific article about fear of missing out. They helped me pick this one out, and I don't know if you can think back to the first time you ever read a scientific article, but it's not that easy. Some of them had read scientific articles before, but many of them were reading it for the first time. There were a lot of acronyms. There were a lot of interruptions. It was very dense. It was very technical. It started out easy. We picked this one because it started out easy, but it got very technical and it got statistical, and they struggled a little bit to read it. So I showed them how to use Notebook to help them when they're struggling to understand something. If you put in an article or 5 articles or 20 articles into Notebook, it gives you these tools that you can use to work with them. You can do an audio overview, a video overview, an infographic, a slide deck. And let me just show you some of these just to give you a sense of, how incredible it is. You've probably heard the audio overview or the podcast, whether you meant to or not. If you have Spotify and Spotify gave you an audio discussion of your year in listening last year, like if it talked about what you like to listen to over the year, that was a Notebook tool. So let me just show you Notebook's. I'll just play a few seconds of Notebook's podcast about that FOMO article.
All right, I want to start us off today by putting you in a very specific time and place.
Okay.
It's Friday night. You're 18 years old. You've been at college for, maybe 3 weeks?
Yeah.
You're sitting in your dorm room. It smells, faintly of floor wax and instant ramen.
Oh, I can feel the visceral pain of this scenario already.
Okay, so just to be clear, the person saying that she feels the visceral pain of the scenario is an AI. They're both AI. It's an AI generated podcast about that article. There are no people feeling visceral pains. But that's a pretty cool way to discuss 1, 5, 10, or 15 articles. And if you have a long commute like I do, and you want to hear a podcast about an article that you may or may not be able to get to, given how busy you are, this can help you get to some of those things and make it a little bit different than reading a dense text. My students enjoyed it. You can also get yourself a little lecture about this article, or these 5 articles, or 10 or 20 articles. This is a video lecture about that FOMO article that goes through step by step. I'm just going to play it for a few seconds.
You know that feeling, right? That little nagging voice in your head that says somewhere someone else is having way more fun than you. We call it FOMO, but it's so much more than just a buzzword. Today, we're going to dig into the actual science of what that feeling really is, all thanks to a fascinating study that tracked it moment by moment. Let's get into it. Yeah, this scenario right here, which comes from the research.
Okay, so this video overview takes the whole paper and talks about the study step by step. You know, the FOMO study was not that hard to understand, but if you're reading something that you are struggling to understand, this can give you a way into it. It's not going to be better than a close reading that you would do, but it's a start, and it can get you to that close reading. I then asked Notebook to generate an infographic based on this article, and so it made this infographic, which is pretty accurate. It's pretty beautiful. And it seems like a useful tool, not just for understanding an article, but think about your own papers, your own articles. If you ever need to do a visual abstract, or you want to include a visual that lays out your argument, this might be a very useful tool for you. I know visual abstracts are getting more popular all the time, and I don't know how much time you would have to spend on your own to make something that looks like this. I don't think I could do it, given all the time in the world. I also asked it to make me a slide deck, and I was very specific about it. And I said, because I'm playing with the tool, trying to figure out what it could do. And I said, I'm going to be talking about this article, so I don't want a lot of text, but I want it to be something that would be in the background while I was talking, that would lay out some of the key points I need to get to. And since I was playing around with it, I asked it to make it look like a map, and like an old-time parchment-y kind of map. So it made me a slide deck. I'll show you a couple of slides. This is the Atlas of Social Anxiety. It's a map of the brain based on what was being discussed in that article. There's the Desert of Isolation, the Citadel of Avoidance. Here is the slide that talks about the study in more detail that I would talk through if I was talking about this article. Here is one of the main ideas of the article, which is that, for road not taken, so obviously this is very elaborate. It took it like 5 minutes to generate a whole slide deck like this. If I had the rest of my life, I could make a slide that looked like this. But I think it's a useful and also fun tool. And I'm going to move to the section 4, intentional strategies, but I'm going to stay with Notebook for a while, because I used it to do something which I think might be useful for you if you're writing for a specific journal, or you're writing a specific grant. So I was talking to people about their specific aims pages, people who are writing for the National Institutes of Health grants. And a specific aims page, if you're not familiar, is sort of a one-page summary of everything that you need to do and you're intending to do in that grant, why it's important, why it should be funded, and like in one page you have a lot of things you need to do. And that one page takes a long time and requires a lot of attention. So what I did was I used Notebook, and I uploaded on the NIH website. There's a lot of sample grants, sample proposals that were funded. So I downloaded the funded proposals and I uploaded them to Notebook, and I asked Notebook to tell me specifically about the specific aims pages. Sorry about all the specifics. To tell me about the specific aims pages and what conclusions I could draw about what works and what doesn't work in a specific aims page. So it made me a nice infographic. It's not great, but it's pretty good. It lays out some of the important things. And then I asked it to make me a slide deck. And this slide deck talks about architecting specific aims. I would never probably write the word architecting myself, but I could see what it was going for. And it extrapolated from the successful grant applications the optimal 4-part structural equation that everybody's taught to do when they write a specific aims page, where they identify the gap and their hypothesis and their aims and the impact. And then it went one by one through those, and it pointed to it pointed to which proposals were good examples of that. So where you're establishing the gap, here's what you need to do when you're establishing the gap. And look at examples 1 through 3 if you want to see a good example of establishing the boundaries of the unknown. And where you're making your testable prediction, look at grants 4 through 6 for a highly testable central hypothesis. Look at grants 5 and 7 for good verbs to use in your aims, like determine, elucidate, or synthesize. And for talking about your innovation and impact, you might want to look at number 6, 8, and 9. So, and then it gave me a little blueprint. So that seems to me like a useful way to use this tool in your writing. And if you're writing for a specific journal, or you're responding to a call, it seems like, let's say I was writing for a journal that I really liked, I could put some of what I considered the best articles from that journal into a notebook and ask it to give me some of the characteristics of those articles. Ask it to compare what I'm writing to those articles. Where can I make it more like their best articles? And it could give me a series of instructions on how to tailor my existing writing for that journal that I was hoping to submit it to. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with Notebook, and I'm going to come back to it later, but let's move on to the strategies section of the talk. So one of the things you want to do when you're working with AI is have a plan or a process or a methodology or a workflow, whatever word you want to use. I think you don't want to just like tell AI, write my paper for me, write my proposal for me. Like here's my idea, just write it. I think we want to, just like we don't want our students to do that, we want to make sure we keep ownership of our ideas. And one of the ways to do that is to have a plan. You might want to start with something that's hard for you. Like, what is keeping you back? What is slowing you down? Writer's block? If writer's block is one of your problems, I think I have good news for you. I don't think writer's block is a thing anymore. It used to be a really real concern, but you can always start now with AI generated text that you can reject. I don't know if it's true for you, but for many people, editing bad work is easier than coming up with your own work. And so I recently, when I was using the writing coach, it gave me this sample paragraph for an introduction. I did not like it at all, but in not liking it, it made me realize what I myself would want to do in that introduction. And so I wrote a couple of paragraphs right then and there, replacing what it suggested. So it was easy for me to decide how I wanted to write it once I saw how I didn't want to write it. I don't know if that makes sense for others. The conventions of the genre, like I was just suggesting with the Notebook LM and the journal articles. If a literature review is the thing that's stopping you, there's the tools that can help you with that. As you're building prompts, you want to be careful to talk about the disciplinary needs. What makes sense for your field, your journal, your article, your proposal. You want to keep track of what's working. If you have a prompt that gives you something really good, you don't want to lose it. Write it down, keep a list. Figure out how you're going to turn this into a workflow. And I would say draw a fence around things that you're not going to give to AI. For example, if you've got data, are you going to, it might tell you what your results are, but are you going to allow it to tell you what those results mean? It feels like that needs to be you, even if you are willing to offload everything else. So draw a little fence around the things that you refuse to offload or that you want to have a guiding hand in. So in these workflows, I would like to point out some concerns I have that I've seen in working with people with AI. One of them is AI overwhelm. I don't know how much you've been doing AI work, but it generates a lot. It generates sometimes too much, and then here's the next thing, and here's the next thing, and you end up, I've worked with people who have like 6 or 7 drafts open, and they were generated from different prompts using different AIs, and did they replicate each other? Did they fit together? Which one is the most current one? Which one is the one they're going over right now? I think, like versioning has always been kind of tricky, and now you can have so many versions that you lose track of where you are at the moment. There's an interesting blog, the most recent blog by Ethan Lalick, who is a good person to follow if you're interested in following AI and teaching or writing. And he calls it a mental tax. It's very exhausting to have eager agents working for you all the time. You have to be constantly giving them things to do and supervising them. And they're starting to do a lot of research on the mental tax, the exhaustion that is engendering in people. Also, it's easy to lose track of which parts you wrote and which parts AI wrote, and where you want to differentiate, where you want to know that. If you've worked with students, sometimes they will, in the research, they will lose track of which sentences, which ideas they got from their research, and which ideas they had originally. And I think we're in a situation where that's very easy for that to happen to us as well. If you've edited an AI draft, I think it's important to note, to keep track of what is your thoughts and what is AI's contribution. And so when AI gives you information, we talked earlier about hallucinations and getting things wrong, and references are still wrong. What is it that you need to check? If AI gives you a list of references that probably work for your statements, are you going to check them all? You need to check them all, but the temptation is going to be great to not do that. I've worked with grants where the citations were non-existent. The citations were to made up sources. And so I think that's going to be disqualifying, or it should be disqualifying, not because you used AI, but because you used AI without oversight, without just taking what it gives you as correct. And then finally, I think a lot of people I talk to feel like they should be using AI, they want to be using AI, they feel like they're getting left behind, but they're also kind of afraid of it, not just because it's cheating, but because it's pretty creepy and freaky sometimes, and everybody feels discombobulated with how much of it there is. And so I think you have to allow yourself to do it even though you're an amateur. If somebody tells you they're an expert at AI writing, I don't see how they could be, because things are coming out. You can be if you're an expert, you're an expert in previous tools, because the new tools are coming out too quickly. I wrote this down. In the last 54 days, Anthropic, which is the company that owns Claude, they released 74 new products. So I don't see how anybody can be an expert at all these tools. But that has to allow you have to have a certain level of comfort, thinking about it as playing with an AI rather than, using AI seriously to get your writing done. So you have to allow yourself the freedom to play and take chances and experiment, which is not always that comfortable. The other thing, I don't have a box for it, but I would encourage you not to think that your workflow has to be all online just because you're using AI. In this talk, I used Claude, and I used Napkin, and I used Notebook, and I used note cards, like 3x5 note cards. And this note card says show note card. So you can still use your old things that work for you as you use the new things that work for you. So I think, like some of the tried and true things are tried and true for a reason. They're helpful, and you don't need to discard all your old methodology. You can still write some things by hand. So when you're at the point in your writing where you don't have a lot on the page and we're trying to get rid of writer's block, there's many things that you can do. You can talk into your phone AI If you have Claude or whatever on your phone, you can talk to it and it'll transcribe it for you. It'll make it all nice and neat and bullet points, and it's like an executive summary of what you were saying. And you can tell it to preserve your phrasing, not to change it too much, but just to get rid of the, like the ums and stuff that we do when we're talking. Some people give it their own published work. If you've got a corpus already of things that you've published and you want your future stuff that is AI enhanced to still sound like you can give it your work and tell it that this is what you sound like. When you ask it for a draft, you can specify that you don't want a perfect draft. You want a work in progress. And I think it's important to do this because otherwise you're going to look at it and think this is not good. Like that's a problem. But I think it's okay that the first draft that it gives you is bad, because that's where you take over. That's where you get involved in your own work to make it good for you. I wouldn't ask it to do a whole document. I would go section by section, carefully reviewing each before moving on to the next. Once you've got a draft, there's some things you can do to work with that draft. You can ask it to summarize your argument back to you. If it's clear, that's a good sign. That means you've been clear. And if it's not what you meant to say, that's a good sign as well. You can ask it to be a critical reader. Like what might somebody disagree with about this draft? If you're sending it out to a journal, you know that somebody's going to be reading it critically. You might as well anticipate what their objections are going to be. You can think about the assumptions that you might have accidentally or unthinkingly put into your writing. What does somebody else need to accept as true to believe what you're saying? What literature did you miss that you should have known about? That's probably more of a research question, but like you can ask it are there any seminal articles on this topic that I missed? And then revising. Let me go back to Notebook for a second. A colleague of ours in another school uploads his drafts to Notebook, and he has Notebook generate a podcast where they talk about his argument. He asks them to have a conversation about his argument so he can evaluate what readers, I guess human readers, but also AI readers, might make of his argument. He might also ask them to do a debate. Let's say you're proposing something with a new methodology, and you know that somebody reading this is going to be a proponent of the old methodology. You can have a debate. You can have a debate podcast between users of the old methodology and users of the new methodology, and what might they argue about based on your work? How would you convince them to accept your proposal? I think that's the kind of creative, innovative strategies that I think we are just out there for us to start thinking about. And I would love to start curating those strategies. You can have it translate for another audience. When I work with the scientists, very often they struggle a lot to take a text and put it into something that what they call an elevator pitch, something you could explain to somebody quickly in an elevator who's not in your lab already, doesn't understand all your science. AI is very good at doing that. But when you read its sort of translation, you'll get a sense of what you're actually saying as it translates it. So if you're going to submit it to a journal, you might have a hostile reviewer. Usually we call them reviewer number 2. Can you ask AI to be that hostile reviewer, be reviewer number 2? Give me your 3 main concerns about my article. Can you say, so what? Be like a writing teacher and say, well, so what? You haven't convinced me that this is important. Can you say, where are the logical connections missing? I'm going to get a little bit more granular in my suggestions here for a second. So I think if you're looking at clarity, you would upload a draft of your document to whatever AI, probably Copilot, and then ask it, where might someone get confused? I think the key here is that you don't want it to fix it. You want it to show you and explain to you why somebody might get confused, because you need to be in charge of that revision process at that point. It's not like adding a comma or an apostrophe. The same thing goes with jargon. If you many people struggle to, it took you a long time to learn all that jargon, and it all comes out when you're writing, and sometimes it's too much jargon for your readers. But can you just tell AI to get rid of your jargon? You can ask it where I might eliminate some jargon, but you don't want it to eliminate your jargon. You want it to show you and suggest, because, and I've had experience with this working with people. Sometimes the jargon can go, but sometimes the jargon is necessary and you can't eliminate it. And you have to be the expert in charge of that. One last one. If English is not your first language and you're writing in English and you're using it for help, and you want to say, make sure my English is sufficiently academic and clear, I would say, make sure to show the output to a native English speaker, because AI can sometimes go too far with that. I was working with somebody who had AI make his writing more academic, but the output was almost a parody of academic writing. Every single word had 5 syllables. Every sentence had a semicolon. So you want to make sure that a native English speaker reads it. And I just encountered something the other day where AI inserted an allusion to a poem into somebody's writing. I didn't know it would do that, but it inserted an allusion to a Langston Hughes poem about a dream deferred. And it seems to me that you need to be in charge of what allusions you are putting into your writing. You wouldn't want to accidentally allude to something. I'm not saying don't allude to something, but I'm saying you don't want to not be aware of the allusions you are using in your writing. So that's a new thing that just crossed my radar Wednesday. And I still have to think about what we're going to do about that. So in this, I made a few pretend workflows that you might use if you're writing an article, like how you might use it in the pre-writing, the thinking part, how you might use it in the drafting part, how you might use it in the revising part, some of the things we already talked about. And I did the same thing for if you're writing a grant. For a grant, you need the significance and innovation to be front and center. So if it wasn't coming across, how would you make sure that it is? If anybody wants these slides afterwards, I'd be happy to email them. I don't think it would help anybody to use this workflow, but I think developing your own workflow like this, or process or procedure, would be a useful thing for somebody to do. So how are you going to use AI without being overwhelmed, without having too many multiple drafts, without losing your voice in the revision process? So as I wrap up, I do want to add a little note about teaching. I think a lot of teachers don't talk to their students about AI. I don't know if you're afraid of opening a can of worms, and maybe if you don't say it, they won't use it, but they're using it and they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble. So I think you need to open that can of worms and have that conversation with your students. I'm talking about AI with my students pretty much every day, every assignment. What do you do now? Why would you do it now? Why not to do it now? How to start by using your own brain and then bring in the AI. And I would also urge you to realize that AI detection software is not useful. It exists, but it gets things wrong all the time. And so I would not want to poison my relationship with my students by accusing anyone of AI who didn't use it, or accusing anyone of inappropriate AI use. And I would say, just like the norms for us are still evolving, the norms for student use are evolving. The students we're going to get next year will have had ChatGPT for all of their high school experience. And so they're going to be they're going to have a different experience than any students we've had before. And I think we have to sort of work with it on a day-to-day basis. So there are things we can do to help. At the Writing Center, as you may have gathered, we work with professors in their own research writing. We can work with you one-on-one, whether you're writing with AI or you're writing without AI. we're happy to work with you. Just this week, I worked with somebody using Copilot, but I worked with starting with like, how do you find Copilot on the computer? Like, you don't have to be an expert at using these things. It can be like somebody holding your hand, helping you use it for the first time, or walking you through using it for the first time. Or obviously, it can be, did let's read my draft together. Did AI insert any accidental poetry allusions to into my grant article, in my grant proposal? We also, this is not an AI thing, but we have a writing accountability group, faculty writing group. If you're interested, we meet a couple times a week for in 2-hour blocks, but you don't have to, most people don't come for those big blocks. It's just drop in. If you're interested in that, let me know. You can email me about that. Since fall of 2023, my colleague Adina Sanchez-Garcia and I have been facilitating, along with another colleague, Nat Deo, have been facilitating a faculty working group on AI. We meet every other week online to talk about using AI in our teaching. We are when you're teaching, you're kind of in the room by yourself with your students, and you don't really talk about what you do with your colleagues that much. So we have this space where we're talking about what we're trying with AI, what's working, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. And different people are showing what they're doing, and we're learning from each other. It's been going on now since fall 2023. We're almost at the end for this semester, but we'll be starting it up again in the fall. If you're interested in joining that group, it's very pleasant and helpful. I've learned so much from it. Last week, 2 faculty members from the business school showed us how they had adopted their class for AI, and I learned a lot from that. At the Writing Center, we're also doing a special initiative where we've gotten some 1-credit lab courses where if you're teaching a class that has significant writing component and you want to encourage your students to write themselves and do some amount of writing themselves and some amount of writing with AI, we have a lab course that they can take. It's 1 credit. They come to the Writing Center a certain number of times over the course of the semester to work on your project. They can work with their consultant. They can sit and write there together, or they can show the drafts in progress to keep them on track, to help them really engage with the material that you're giving them, to give them an incentive to not wait till the last minute and then just put it in ChatGPT. And then this last column is the AI and writing strategies curated library I've been proposing during this talk. I'm going to put this slideshow in there, and if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear some suggestions, and I would love to hear what other people are doing, and maybe we can talk about that after this last slide. So that QR code will take you to an AI and writing strategies. Hopefully, it's a Google form, and hopefully it's something I can turn into a little library. At there are other AI resources. There's Petal, which has the teaching and learning policy for AI. There's Topple, which has courses like LinkedIn kind of courses to help you learn to use AI. There's UM's IT AI Hub, which will help you with AI projects if you've got ideas for things you want to do. The Libraries has an AI guide. And Academic Technologies will talk to you about Canvas and Adobe Firefly and what the tools are that you can use. So that is my presentation. Thank you for listening. If you have the strategies to share, I would love for people to ask some questions or put their strategies in the talk right now. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. But remember, I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a writing teacher. I'm going to stop my share and hopefully we'll see some questions. Mitsu, were there any questions going along during the talk?
Yes, I want to. Yeah, it's not a question, but I just wanted to tell you or inform you and the audience that the American Association for Artificial Intelligence, it's called the AAAI. About 3 years ago, they began the practice of using a AI as a reviewer the conference receives, it's an annual conference, it receives about 50,000 papers from all over the world. So this last year, the AI reviewer became a formal reviewer. So each paper was assigned to three human reviewers and one AI reviewer, along with the meta reviewer who oversees the process of discussions and reviews. So I had an opportunity to review a handful of papers for the conference last year. I felt that the AI reviewer very meticulous in looking at all sort of scientific formulas and derivations and discussions, but provided too many references. Right? So in the human cases, at the most, three references added. Right? We said, oh, this paper is missing a reference to this important paper and this relevant paper. And the length is about 1.5 pages. AI review was like 4 to 5 pages and with more than a dozen references. So yeah, clearly there is a difference. I'm not saying that the AI review is wrong, but there is clearly a distance between how much a human reviewer can provide as a reviewer or concentrate on, and what the AI reviewer can do as a reviewer. So it was an interesting experience. And it looks like many other conferences are incorporating this concept of using AI as a reviewer.
Thinks the procedure is going to have to adapt, right? If
Mhm.
if AI is making it much easier for people to write papers, we're going to get a lot more papers written, and we can't be our regular slow reviewers
Right.
who are overwhelmed and busy working on other things. So I think that's sort of inevitable. How are there 50,000 submissions to this conference? Is that
Right, so lots of reviewers, about 1,000 reviewers are, say, mobilized in the review process. It's a crazy couple months reviewing papers. So it's a hierarchical review committee. The top level reviewers, sort of an organizer of the conference, and second in command, about a dozen people looking after each individual areas. And then the third level of a conference organizers, so more dedicated reviewers in each of the topic. Then low-level sort of reviewers like myself looking after individual papers that were assigned to them. Hmm.
I think and Angie has a question.
Yeah, yes. April, can you see the questions in the Q&A?
Read those for you if you'd like.
That would be great.
Sure. Stephen Roper says it's not a question, a suggestion. Students always ask me, a professor at Miller, how should I prepare for the exam? One of my suggestions has been to upload my lecture or lectures into AI and ask AI to generate a series of multiple choice questions. This gives them a practice exam. It's important to tell AI at what level the exam will be, example, first year grad student, third year, etc.
Yes, I think students also are using AI in many creative ways that helps them study. Like we are, notebook AI might be the best cheating tool in history, but it's also the best study tool in history. When did you ever have somebody who would work with you on something nonstop for as long as you want, generate hundreds of questions for you, tell you exactly where you went wrong in the question, and give you another question similar to that to practice? it is pretty amazing. And students, if you ask them, they're using it in all kinds of interesting ways.
Second question is from Engelbush. How does AI prevent bias in the review?
Mitsu, I'll let you handle that one. I think that's for you.
That's a very difficult question. So in a
You still
so
there?
when it comes to scientific publications, right? So in the case of AI, it's mostly about how to take AI approaches, algorithms, machine learning, deep learning to accomplish certain things. So the reviews are not specific about so the biases, meaning so that they are more concerned about where the data came from, and how the algorithms are designed, how the experiments are carried out, and how good the results are. So in such a context, I would think, and I would assume that there is very little room for a bias coming in. But when it comes to a more applied conference or a such as a narrowly defined problem, such as finding ways of solving certain clinical or health problems. There is a room for bias. A So the organization, the American Association of Artificial Intelligence that I referred to, it has been very careful about not using, although eliminating biases. So I think they are a large language models for that purpose is examined, improved, customized, so that they'll be able to detect any bias that might cause. But there is always room. So verification of what the review says is always important. I think that is the sort of only protection against biases that we have at this moment.
I think in general, we're seeing an acceptance of a certain level of inaccuracy and problematic generation in AIs that I think we have to be on guard for. I was talking last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, to a group of students at the medical school, and one was saying that many of the doctors are using AI to scribe for during their clinical sessions, and they know that it's not always accurate, but it's they're using it anyway. I mean, I guess humans weren't always accurate either, but there's a certain level of acceptance of the tools because they're cheap and fast and there that I think we need to be careful for. That's not really like in our own writing. I think if we read it over carefully, if we stay at the helm, I think we can make sure that we're not adding bias to our writing. But if we use it to offload things, I think we need to stay on top of it, the bias. Anybody else have any questions?
Don't see any open questions in the chat.
Okay, so I'm a.mann@miami.edu. If you'd like me to send you the slideshow, if that could be useful for you, I'd be happy to do that. I don't know if anybody wants to work on AI writing together. I had in the slideshow, there were QR codes that you could use to schedule an appointment or to talk to me about scheduling an appointment. So think I'll go back to like, thanks for listening, and thank you everybody who attended. Unless we have
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, April. I want to thank you from everyone on behalf of everybody.
So before adjourning, so there was a request to see the QR code.
Okay, I will share my screen again. Let me go back there. Sorry. Let me just go back to the slide with the multiple QR codes. So the individual consultations are on the left, or you could email me, a.mann@miami.edu, to arrange that. If you wanted to be part of our faculty working group, which, as I said, has been really eye-opening and fun for me, you could, and I hopefully for other people in participating as well, that's the center QR code. And if you had suggestions for things people could do in the AI and their academic writing, the one on the far right is a library of strategies that I'm trying to develop. Is that
Okay?
Answer the question?
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Let's see. This is right. So there's another, say, a comment asking to share the AI resources slide.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
so is this a slide? Or
AI resources slide. I think the whole slideshow was AI resources. Maybe this one? I have to go all the way back. Let me stop the share. I'm not sure which slide that is, but I'm happy to share the whole slideshow with anybody who'd like. Or I can send it out,
Okay.
To the list of people who were there.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. So let's conclude the seminar. Thank you very much, April. Again, we very much appreciate you sharing your experience or thoughts with us.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. Bye.